and welcome once again. Today we are going to be going over how a very severely neglected set of AC Schnitzner Type III wheels went from an absolutely ragged, neglected state into the gorgeous examples that you see before you today. It was a very long process. I'm not gonna try to undersell how much work went into this. Between two people, we probably put about 25 to 30 man hours into restoring these. It was no small task, but the results were very much well worth it. I hope you enjoy this, and thank you for watching. I'm just gonna get this out of the way now. I bought an E39 540i. It's a big piece of crap, and I'll get into that story in another video, but the main focus is the wheels. They were not crappy, in theory. Structurally, they were very sound, but they just hadn't been cleaned in about a decade. Maybe more, but we'll see. The iron deposits were incredibly bad, and I'm hoping that they're worth saving. This is after a quick wash, and you can see just how bad the deposits are. Thankfully, it's on the surface of the wheel, so I knew they were salvageable, but they would need to come apart to clean them properly. So they needed to be taken apart, and in order to do that, the valve core was removed first to drain all of the air from the tires. With the tires drained, it was now safe to take off the face of the wheel, and these are two-piece wheels, not three-piece, so pulling off the face was no trouble and no worry whatsoever. I loosened everything by hand first before pulling out the power tools, so don't worry. A couple good whacks with a hammer and a small block of wood made the faces come right out, so now I only had to do this 60 more times. With the faces separated from the barrels, you can really see how extensive the neglect went. I mean, the faces of this wheel alone are just disgusting, and that's compared to a relatively clean one that up close is still pretty bad. But those are almost nothing compared to the barrels and lips of these wheels. The barrels are supposed to be black, but they are just brown because of all of the rusty iron deposits. And this one hasn't been washed at all, and you can tell it's just coated in years worth of grime. To start off the cleaning, I hit them with a high pressure hose, which did nothing. And then it was time to spray them down with some heavy duty wheel cleaner. Now this stuff will turn purple as it eats through all the brake dust and iron deposits and everything. I spray it on, let it soak for a couple minutes, then agitate it with a non-abrasive brush, let it sit for another couple minutes, and then agitate it all over again. And by now you can see it turning pretty purple. So I would say it's about done, but I'm still taking special care to get into all the nooks and crannies because I want to make sure that I get as much of it off as possible. The most satisfying part is seeing the results, so I really enjoy rinsing the wheels, and these look pretty good. Definitely a long way to go, but they look pretty good for now. We rinsed and repeated the process on the back side of the wheel as well. Sorry, I promised myself I wouldn't do any puns, but I couldn't resist. So we gave them a good scrub down with a heavy-duty wheel cleaner once again, and then finally just rinsed it all off, and look at that silver finish. And now it's time to give the same treatment to the barrels. Now the barrels are supposed to be black, not the brown that you're seeing in the video here, but we're doing the same thing, just agitating the wheel cleaner, letting them sit, and then giving them a good long rinse, and look at all that purple coming off of there. Now the polished lips were a completely different story. I had to actually hit them with a gray Scotch-Brite pad with very, very light pressure. So that and the same cleaner and many, 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 many passes, and all of the grime and deposits were finally coming off. So already there on the second pass, you can see a pretty big difference. And I have a few stubborn spots, namely around the valve stem, but I'll get to those in a bit. For now, I'm just going to move on to the barrel. You can still see here, even after the cleaner and the agitating, that it's still pretty brown and rusty in there. So I'm going to hit them with the same Scotch-Brite pad and light pressure and just try and get as much of that off as I can. And you can see all the brown bubbles coming off of it, which is kind of satisfying, but at the same time not, because I knew it meant that I had a lot more work. But getting the grime out from under the valve stem just required a little tool on that same Scotch-Brite pad to fit under there, and a few passes and it came right out. I just had to have the right tool to do it. And here is a gratuitous after shot. Look at the black barrel, the polished lips. This came out beautiful. And just to remind you of where we came from, oof. And now here you can see what I mean about the wheels not being as clean up close as they seem far away. There's clearly a ton of deposits still left on here. Here's the clay bar after one pass. It's pretty bad, and unfortunately it seems like my video of the first clay bar pass has been lost in the iCloud universe. I apologize for that, but we have these other smaller segments to use too. If this looks time-consuming and tedious, it's because it is. This part took us the better part of 2.5 hours, each of us doing 2 faces each. And I know it took that long because we watched an entire movie while we did this. Here's the first section done, looking pretty good. We're about 95% of the way there for that one section, and that is compared to where we started. Pretty rough shape, lots of little details that are very time consuming to take care of, including cleaning up the AC Schnitzer logo on the center cap. And here is the finished wheel face. I'm super pleased with the results. This was a lot of work, but this is all just with clay bar and not polishing, and we're even so fancy that we're cleaning out the wheel bolt holes. Which means that it is finally time to move on to polishing the lips of the wheels. So you can see here it's pretty dull and marred in a few places. So they do need a little bit of love, but at least there are no more deposits on them. In a well-ventilated space, we use the liquid white diamond metal polish on a Powerball drill attachment and just went around the wheel one small section at a time, and you go until the polish starts to turn black, at which point you wipe it off, look at your results, and keep moving on. And this is after one complete pass with the polisher. It definitely looks much better than it did, but it's still a little dull and it's not as shiny as the OEM finish, so we're gonna keep going. For comparison's sake, this is 2 passes with the polisher on the left compared to no passes on the right. A big, big difference. I'm loving the results. That should about do it for the lips. We are now 3 passes in and they are nice and shiny, and now it's time to move on to the actual wheel bolts. They are all very dull and brown and now do not match the lovely finish on the lips. So I'm taking the same wheel cleaner and giving the bolts a good scrub. It didn't really give me the results I was looking for, so I decided to change my method and try and put them in a dunk in the ultrasonic cleaner which also resulted in relatively underwhelming results. So we needed to go a little bit more aggressive with it. That's more like it. Life is better with power tools. Speaking of, we decided to make a bench polisher out of a zip tie and a bench vise. And it made quicker work of these, and before on the left, after on the right. And it's a pretty significant difference, and we only had to do it 80 times. And yet another comparison to really send it home. And now here's a week's worth of work summed up in a few photos. Hope you enjoy. So that concludes this project. I sincerely hope you enjoyed watching it. It was very tedious work. It was a lot of labor, a labor of love, but a lot of labor anyway. I think the details made it worth it. You know, just the little things like the bolts, just polishing each one. It's a lot of work, but people like us appreciate that kind of thing, and I hope you do as well. So thank you again for watching, and good night.